Hello everybody, thank you very much for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Amy Nichols and I'm Research Director at Marketing Sciences, and we're sat in our office in Winchester delivering this webinar. I've got Becky Hutchins with me as well, who's going to be taking your questions at the end. It's a cold rainy day today where we are. I expect it's probably the same where you are as well, so it's a good day to be sat listening to a webinar, I think. The aim of today is just to give you some ideas and some tips to get the most out of any research that you might be doing in store. I'm not really just talking about in shops. This could be any research that you do in a shop, in a bank branch, in a restaurant, or in the street, or with customers in any other face-to-face environment. So if you're involved in things like customer satisfaction or shopper research, maybe to understand your shopper, or perhaps you want to get some feedback on some point of sale that you've designed, or a new fixture design, or maybe you're talking about getting feedback on some new concepts that you're testing in store, or getting feedback on maybe a potential new shop that you're thinking of opening in the area and you want to do some street interviews. Basically, the options are limitless, and what I'm talking about today is how to do the best research that you can when you're interrupting somebody in the middle of a purchase process, or maybe they're just going about their day quite happily. Imagine you're leaving a Tesco store after a very lengthy shopping trip where you've spent a lot of money and your shopping list was extremely long, and then you're stopped by a market research interviewer. Perhaps you're in the middle of browsing the confectionery aisle and you're about to make that critical choice between Mars and Snickers. How can we as researchers make sure that our research is actually as good as it can be and it's going to provide you with great results and great insights? So why am I giving this webinar today? It's a good question. I've worked at Marketing Sciences now for 9 years, and most of that time I've been spent doing research which involves face-to-face research with shoppers. That's the work that we've been doing, and for me it's mostly been in a retail environment. Personally, I really do love face-to-face research. We have a lot of different techniques that we offer here, which is great, and we have a very broad toolkit. But I do think that you can't beat speaking to people directly about that experience that they have literally just had. And a lot of my tips today are going to revolve around collecting data in that face-to-face environment. But equally, many of these tips are going to be able to apply to qual research too, so things like intercepts and shopper safaris. I do remember many years ago, and I'm making myself sound very old, I'm not that old, but I do remember with the advent of online research, and also to an extent telephone, people talked about the death of face-to-face interviewing. However, I think whilst it's fair to say that many studies have moved online, there are still actually a great many that have not and will not ever really be able to move online. A couple of years ago at Marketing Sciences, we made a huge investment in upskilling our entire face-to-face fieldwork team with Android tablets. And it was a lot of hard work, but it has paid off in a very short amount of time. And gives us the ability to be able to conduct over 1 million interviews for just one client alone in the moment at store exits. So I truly believe that face-to-face research, it's not an old method. It's definitely very, very current. So you might be listening to this webinar today. Perhaps you're in the retail world yourself, which is great. Maybe you are listening to this from a banking or a financial sector focus, or hospitality, restaurants, petrol stations maybe, or indeed just anywhere with numerous outlets. Equally, you could be coming at this from a very different perspective, which might be the supplier perspective. A lot of our in-store research is actually for those brands that supply retailers. So food and drink brands, for example, or non-food products such as toys or clothes. Sometimes the best way to access your customers is really by finding them at the point of purchase itself. So that was rather a long intro, but I'm just going to take you through 10 ways to do better research in store. Please do use the questions box, which I hope you can all see, to ask any questions along the way, and then there's going to be a Q&A session at the end where Becky's going to read out some of the questions that you're asking. And I really do encourage you to ask any questions or just give your feedback or comments along the way so that I feel less like I'm sitting in an empty room talking to nobody. Okay, so let's crack on. So tip number 1, in the moment. Face-to-face research, I do believe, as I've said before, is one of the best ways to get in-the-moment feedback on that retail environment, or on the shopping trip, or on the services offered by staff. It just provides an immediacy that other methods can't really match in the same way, and I do think that's really important if you want a timely measure of satisfaction in store, for example. I guess the importance of speaking to a customer in the moment is that you are likely to get much closer to their real opinion of what happened during that experience on that day and at that time. So the further removed our questioning is from that experience, the more prone it comes to clutter and more subjective matter around perceptions and values and perhaps other memories. We have been in the, you could say, a fortunate position with one of our clients to run similar studies in store, online and on the telephone all at the same time, which actually was a busy time, let's say, but it gave us a brilliant insight into how different results can actually be across those different methods. And analysis that we did at that time has shown that there can be quite a big time delay on customers noticing the impact of a change in an in-store environment if they're interviewed at a later time via an online survey, for example, or a survey off a receipt. So the length of that time delay that we see depends on a number of things. I'm going to show you some examples in a minute. So the type of question that you're asking somebody, if you're asking quite an objective question, such as whether that customer actually noticed something, and it's a yes/no answer, what we saw is that results are picked up much more immediately, and there's not a lot of difference between surveying someone online and in the moment. However, what's really fascinating is that the more subjective questions are actually much slower to see any change. I guess by their nature they're already linked with individual perceptions of what it might mean to be clean, or what that brand actually means for good value for money, and general experiences that they've had previously. So take this example. So I've got a chart up here. So here's an example of customers that are asked exactly the same question. This is real data from a tracking study from the past, all anonymised, of course. And one of these lines is asking about price perceptions. So one's asked about a retailer in store, and they were interviewed in the moment at the end of that shopping trip. And the other that I'm going to show you is asked about that same retailer, but we surveyed them online several days later. So in store, we can see peaks and troughs that correspond to some in-store price promotions over a period of time. And online, we can see, there's a similar general trend being seen. But a peak at this point is not seen online, but there is a more general uplift. But it actually takes several months to kind of start coming through and display. Likewise, a dip in satisfaction here, which was linked to a time when pricing strategies may have changed, that actually wasn't seen online until several months later. So really, customers, they really take longer to change their brand perception when they're surveyed online. So when you're interviewing in store and in the moment, I think this is evidence. You get a much more honest view, and it's clouded by less perception, and it gives you the ability to be able to take this and make changes based on that feedback. My colleague Danny has written a great thought piece about this actually, and it goes into the matter in some more detail, and I can recommend it as a read if you're particularly keen to know more about this. It can be found on our blog on the Marketing Sciences website, but we're going to send you some details as a lucky webinar listener in the follow-up email that you'll probably get after this webinar. So you've got that to look forward to. Okay, so tip number 2 is the length of the shopping trip. So it's really, really important to match your questionnaire length to the length of the shopping trip. If customers are in and out of your store, or perhaps they're in and out of your aisle in a matter of minutes, You really have to make sure your questionnaire length matches this. There is really no point in having a market research questionnaire that takes longer than the shopping trip itself. We have to keep it really focused. If, for example, we're researching in the convenience sector, we know that we can be no more than 5 minutes maximum with the customer. Having stood at the exit of convenience stores many times myself, doing qual intercepts, I think yes, you definitely need to be quick, and sometimes it's brutal. You have to be as quick as you can be because people are in such a rush. And this applies to other places too, for example, petrol station shops, anywhere where people are rushing in and out. If we are researching a more considered purchase or a more enjoyable purchase, so for me that might be in the wine aisle. If I was stopped there, I might be keen to spend a bit longer. We can be with that customer for a bit longer and get more insight and research out of them. Another example, if we're researching the frozen category, for example, we can't really spend too long with customers in the frozen aisle because they get cold. It sounds obvious, but these are all things that we have to consider when we're designing any survey and any research with you. If we're researching in the toy aisle, for example, we might be able to spend a bit longer. But if there are children with a shopper, they might start playing with the toys a bit too much. The parent might get a bit distracted, and they might cut the interview short because they need to go and discipline little Johnny. Okay, an example, some work that we conducted for Heineken. It's just an example, but it involved doing some quant in-store interviews with customers who had visited the beer and the cider area during that shopping visit. To understand customer engagement with the fixture, and that research ended up playing a key role in deciding which elements of that fixture needed to be taken forward to the retailer, as a convincing argument for why the retailer should do it Heineken's way, for example. This was interesting because we could spend longer with customers in the aisle, so about 10 to 15 minutes we were able to spend with shoppers at the fixture in the middle of their shopping trip. It's longer than we can do in some other categories. I think even if you're in a category or an environment where you can't spend that long listening or talking to the customer, there is always the opportunity of combining in-store interviews with observations, for example, it can be really powerful if you're trying to understand the shopper behaviour for your product or for your fixture area. Our interviewers, they can record the actual behaviour in the aisle and then ask them about it. You might have, for example, this is something I worked on a few years ago, a customer browsing the light bulb fixture, quite a stressful shopping mission, particularly for me, but I'm sure for many of us. We can observe how long shoppers are spending browsing, whether they picked up any products, whether they look confused, whether they looked at the packaging, whether they looked at any point of sale, and then ultimately whether they made a purchase. And that's all part of understanding the shopper behaviour. Okay, moving on. Tip number 3, quality. It's really important to have quality control systems in place before you start any research in an in-store environment, or indeed any research. I think to be completely, to be able to rely on the data that you collect, you need to ensure that your field force is really clear on what's expected from them, from their work. We say to you, ask your agency what quality controls they have in place with their field force. How do they check what their interviewers are doing? It's not the glamorous side of the industry, I think it's fair to say, and I'm sure the field team here would not disagree with that, but it is definitely one of the most important. Are your agency, are they spot checking interviewers regularly? Are interviewers accompanied by their supervisor regularly? Are they back checking at least 10% of customers, which involves basically phoning them up afterwards just to check that they have been surveyed in the correct way? Are your agency, are they analysing the data that comes in from interviewers to check the average length of the interviews or any breaks taken and any consistencies at all? If it's in retail, perhaps they might be asking interviewers to sign in and out. That's a must. Are they asking interviewers to make a small purchase at the beginning and the end of their shift, perhaps, to send in the receipt? This is all quality control measures that they should be doing. It's actually a lot of administration to make all of those things happen, we won't lie, but without it, I don't think we can be confident in the data that we supply to clients, and without confidence, there's no insight. Okay, so moving on to number 4, time. I do like that picture. Allow enough time to complete the field work. It does sound completely obvious, but it's worth saying it. Interviewers, they are human too, believe it or not. They get ill, they get lost, their car breaks down. We've heard a lot of reasons over the years for why they might be unable to complete their interviewing shifts. And that's all fine, that's all part of day-to-day life. We just have to make sure that we are leaving a little bit of time at the end of field work to mop up any missed shifts. Sadly, as well, we can't control the weather in the UK. It sometimes does get in our way. If you're interviewing outside, it goes without saying, really, that we're not going to get as many interviews on rainy days as on sunny days. And when it's snowing, we struggle to get to work. Interviewing will be affected as well. So we just need to think about this and try and account for it in our timings. Always easier said than done, I know, when everyone's in a rush to get the insight. Okay, number 5, automate. So automate means conducting all face-to-face interviews as far as you can via tablet. So we get increased accuracy, we get better speed of data delivery, and there's even more quality control measures that we can do. That means it's now become absolutely critical that we carry out any face-to-face work using tablet rather than any pen and paper as previously was done. The benefits are just numerous. There's no routing for interviewers to follow because it's all done automatically. We're able to display things to participants. We can show TV ads and pictures, battery life withstanding, of course. And actually, most importantly, we have a quicker turnaround of our results to the clients. We learn a lot about transitioning paper questionnaires over to tablet, and it was a lot of hard work, but it has seen a monumental shift in the accuracy and the quality and the speed that you're able to deliver. So automating is absolutely critical. It's been applied directly in our work for Tesco recently, for example, where we're able to supply them with customer interviews for their Voice of the Customer programme across every single store in the UK, which is no small matter. And actually, it was a major study that really, we know that it was only possible because of the investment in tablets and having that all automated. Okay, so number 6, I like this one. Anything is possible. So this is just a reminder. It is perhaps obvious, but it's worth remembering that customers, they will stop and they will be interviewed, even in a busy store environment, even in a very low penetration category. And I'm always surprised sometimes that the willingness that members of the public have to stop and do market research. And obviously that's great news for us being in the business of insight, but it is definitely just worth always keeping in the back of our minds that we can try anything with these people. Even in areas where consumer interest might be lower, so for example in financial services where not everybody loves talking about those kinds of things or is interested in it, customers, they will stop and they will answer questions about it. Even in the DIY sector, for example, if we're trying to interview tradesmen at the beginning of their very busy day collecting materials from the shop, and they're going off, they're about to go off and do a job and they've got no time at all, we can still stop them and actually talk to them. I think so long as there's a well-trained interviewer or moderator there to intercept and encourage participation and build that relationship, you've got a much better chance of getting those customers to stop and give you their opinions. It's not just about stopping interviewers, though, to do a quant survey or a call intercept. You can do a lot more with your shoppers once you've actually found them. So I've just put some examples on the screen. I'll just set those going. You can stop them and you can recruit them to come back and do some eye tracking on your fixture, perhaps at a later date. Which is really powerful stuff that you can do with people when you're actually finding them face to face. It's also, let me go back a minute, sorry. It's also a great opportunity to stop them and get some footage, and actually get them to talk on camera about some of the things that you're interested in. It's a really brilliant opportunity to bring the customer to the boardroom. Show your stakeholders what real customers are saying. Some of those people have stopped now. Oh, that man, he's stopped mid-laugh, that's nice. Let them hear customers talking about an issue firsthand. If you can't get your boardroom down onto the shop floor all at the same time, bring the customer to them. I do think there's nothing more powerful or interesting than hearing real people discuss that idea that you've been talking about in meetings for the last 3 months non-stop. So anything is possible. The other side to that is my tip number 7, be realistic. So anything is possible, but we do have to be realistic. I think it's important to think about the number of interviews that it's realistic to achieve in an interview, a 6-hour shift, for example. We have to think about, how many eye tracking respondents can we actually do to tell us what we need to know. I think you also need to think about who we're looking to interview. Is it all shoppers? Then that's fine. Is it mums of babies aged up to 12 months shopping in the baby aisle? Maybe slightly trickier. Is it female shoppers with children who buy fish fingers? Or is it young men who buy hula hoops? We have to set quite a fine balance, I think, between something achievable and something that puts a bit of pressure, hence my picture, on interviewers so that we can get the best return from them. For example, a recent piece of work conducted for B&Q, this involved interviewing tradesmen in store about a key growth category. And as a core quant project, we had to be realistic about the number of interviewers that someone will actually be able to achieve in one 6-hour shift. And I think we ended up, knowing that we needed to set this lower than for a standard consumer study. However, it is about finding opportunities to enhance the research. So whilst we were doing qual intercepts as part of that project, we were able to get some of those tradesmen to show us how they actually store some of those products that we were particularly interested in. We did a van rummage, which is all part of just making the most of the time that you can spend with customers in store. Okay, tip number 8, I think we're all there. This is one for you, but important nonetheless. Make sure your research agency knows as much about the in-store environment or your customers as possible, so share knowledge. To know the business problem, the reasons behind the research, what you're trying to get from it, any problems that you foresee. Perhaps there's some local or cultural information that's specific to the area that you're being interviewed in, or any category knowledge that we need to know. Help us put the pieces of the jigsaw together, basically, so that we can understand your business as well as you do. So, for example, if we're likely to see lots and lots of people interviewed and they're going to be highly dissatisfied about something, and you already know that this could crop up as an issue, tell us, and then we know to expect it, and we won't be too surprised to see lots of low scores. Maybe you're a food brand and you might have seen some issues recently with your packaging or your point of sale in store not being implemented properly. Tell us, and then when we're there, we know what to expect, and it helps us to put the pieces of the jigsaw together. And number 9, as with any research, think about your reporting requirements. Are you looking for data, vox pops, verbatims, instant feedback perhaps? Robust data? Are you looking to improve your in-store environment, or are you looking to shape your staff training program? Are you trying to improve your layout at your fixture? What is it that you actually want to see from the results, and then how do you want that to be communicated? Do you want a PowerPoint report, or do you want direct engagement with store managers? Do you want to feed the insights straight to your marketing teams directly? Or do you want a video that you can easily distribute around the business to promote the voice of the customer? Or perhaps you want an infographic. Or if you're short of time, perhaps you literally just want a quick telephone top line summary so that you can move quickly on the insight that's being generated. I think whatever you want, it's all about communicating clearly at the beginning, so that in this fast-moving world of customer research, as much can be set up in advance as possible. Certainly in an ideal world anyway, that would be the case. Okay, and finally, tip number 10 is recontact. Will you need to get back in touch with any customers researched? Sometimes, if you've gone to the effort of capturing the feedback from a group of customers, potentially hard to reach customers, and you think you may wish to speak to them again at a later date for more feedback, then this is a great opportunity to do so. So you could get the details and their permission, explicit permission, to recontact them at a later date. So then they could be contacted in the near future for perhaps a follow-up piece of research or some core research, or we could invite them along to a focus group, or we could invite them to join in with an online bulletin board to explore some further concepts. I think it's all about trying to make the most of that interaction with the customer or your shopper when you actually see them, and then just thinking, okay, how can we maximise what we're getting out of these people? Okay, so I've taken you through 10 top tips for doing your in-store research better. I do hope that was useful, and I hope you've got some food for thought and things that you can take away and maybe wonder how to implement into your own in-store or face-to-face research programs. Before we go on to the questions, I can't resist giving you a freebie. So I don't know if you saw, I'd like to draw your attention to it if you didn't, a 16-page supplement that featured in the Times newspaper a couple of weeks ago on the future of market research. So in case you missed it, it was a great little magazine that basically, you don't often see market research in a national newspaper. So it's available for free download from our website if you click on the our insights section of the page, and it's got some interesting articles about using technology in research, an article about how to ask the right questions, and something on the future of qual, and some other bits and pieces are in there as well. And then this picture shows a big box of these that are sat right by my desk. So if you prefer reading something physical with a cup of tea, please do email me after this webinar and I can send you one in the post, and you can read it at your leisure. Okay, so that's my freebie. Okay, so we're going to move on to some questions, and Becky's going to have a look at what questions we've got. So bear with us while we sort that.
Okay, thank you very much, Amy. That's
Okay.
really good. We've got a few questions here, so we'll go through them one by one.
Yep.
So first question here from Jackie is, would a mobile app not give you the immediate feedback without being intrusive on the shopper, i.e. influenced by the researcher?
Okay. So would a mobile app not give you the immediate feedback? Yes, I think I absolutely think that there is definitely a place for mobile apps in research, and I think it's all about trying to figure out if that is going to suit your requirements and your particular customer type. It depends what kind of mobile app we're talking about. So if we're trying to ping a survey to someone, do they have that app installed in the first place? I think what we do really like doing is sort of inviting participants to install an app, with their explicit permission that we can then use to follow up with them later at a later date. That often tends to be more qualitative because of the nature of it, and budget requirements. I also think if you're doing certain studies, there's always a representative issue around people who are willing to download apps and provide feedback in that way. So that I think there's a time and a place for it, to be honest, Jackie. And the other point of your question about it not being influenced by the researcher, yes, absolutely. That would definitely be a benefit. We do train our interviewers very carefully so that they know not to interpret the questions in their own way and all that sort of thing. But I think there's a place for both of them. Great question. Okay.
Okay, thank you. We've got a question here from Benanti. Do we have any more information on the lag time, so between doing a paper interview in store versus a web interview?
Yes, we do. Yeah, I can send something over to you if you would like. It was a piece of work that we did, and I will just have to check client sensitivities, but I think I know which organisation you're from, and I actually think that would be okay. So, yes.
And we can definitely send you a copy of the Times as well.
Good. Excellent. And do we have any other questions?
Yeah, so I've got another one here from Anne. So Anne's asking, how much harder is it to get someone to interview on film?
Oh, right, yes. It's definitely harder. I think we would all feel quite put out, if somebody came up to us with a film camera and wanted us to immediately to speak on film. That's not really how we would do it. I mean, when we interview people on camera, it's tends to be much more qualitative in nature. We're looking for vox pops. Usually what we've asked is our moderators are quoting, they build a relationship with that person first, they get the insight from them, and then they might ask them, okay, would you mind now going on camera and just repeating some of those things that you've said? By that point, hopefully they'll all be best friends and impossible to say no to. But yes, it is an impact, and it's sort of not really something we would do quantitatively on a very large scale.
Brilliant, thank you.
Thanks, Anne.
I think I've got time for one more.
How are we doing? Yes, one more and then we'll go.
Okay, so last question from Becky, not myself, but different one. So thinking about wanting to recontact participants once they've taken part in a survey, how does that work with data protection?
I think so. So as long as you have the explicit agreement from your participant that you would like to get in touch with them regarding this research, then that's okay. We have to get their agreement to do it, and depending on the nature of the study, we usually find quite a high agreement. It works even better if we can tell them what we'd like to get in touch with them again for. So we might be able to say to them, could we get in touch with you in the following month to invite you to a focus group potentially? Or I think it works better if we're able to equip them with the knowledge of what we might want to get in touch with them for, rather than it being an open-ended, never-ending agreement between them. And I think best practice, we would want to kind of make use of that agreement from them as soon as possible, to maximise the response rate that we might get from them. So if they agree, then obviously their data is then stored securely with us at Marketing Sciences, and all in accordance with the Data Protection Act and the Fair Data accreditation as well. Oh, that was a serious one.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much to everybody who has listened today. Thanks, Rebecca. And we have another webinar coming up shortly, next month, I think it is, on the mobile wallet by Richard Snoxill, and he is going to be talking about the impact of the developments in mobile wallet technology and what consumers really think about that. So a completely different topic, but very interesting all the same. Thanks everyone for listening, and do drop me an email if you have any questions, and we'll speak to you soon.